another Krishna replete with the Sri Yantra or with the Megan star everywhere. So you see, this is also a symbol of the priesthood. So whoever's looking for a savior, because some people are like, and this symbol also right here is called Leviathan, by the way. It's where they get the narwhal or the horned sea beast. But you have to look deep into symbolism before you can recognize what this is. And of course, the peacock has always been synonymous with the Phoenicians, and also the phoenix, which of course brought the phonetics or the language. So of course we see here again the Sri Yantras. We also see the flute, which was held in the other hand of the individual with the 5-pointed star on their head, meaning knowing how to charm serpents. And this means that in a tense, because there is, as you see, there's a reptilian portion of the brain. There's, of course, a spine in a person's body, and there's these fluids. The idea of being able to charm or move up these fluids with tones and vibrations is really what this flute symbolism entails. And that's why Pythagoras was fascinated when he was said to finally discover the notes and the scales to the harmonics. And of course, this is a gentleman reading the Kibra Nagast to show you that the Ethiops were actually worshippers of the serpent in Ophilatreia. And even that's what the word Ethiop actually means. So anytime you look into the deeper symbolism, you'll find that the Nagas definitely passed through Nubia, and that they set up an entire priestcraft there. And that's why the Ethiopians claim that they are the founders of the original covenant. And the guy, the Weekend, obviously is in the know to a certain degree, even though he doesn't want to tell his people. But he shows the horn god Menelik, or MLK, or Moloch, the king or the crown horn god, and why he's singing I Know Everything. So what it's about is about, once again, the horn god. I mean, sick. This is, coming to an end at the end of this year, obviously. We see here Krishna, again, with the flute. And this is the general stylization of Krishna. And as Krishna starts to metamorphosize, and actually the religions begin to metamorphosize, no longer is the god depicted as a serpent. The god becomes depicted as a man. And the reason why this was done is to invent the ego, or the eagle, or the idea that we're actually, how can I put it? It can invent the idea that we've actually obtained the state of the Most High while still being in our lowest state. And so this is why there was a decision, obviously, by the priestcraft to take away this serpent symbolism. And more than likely, there were several conflicts with other individuals in getting rid of this symbolism. And so what they decided is to then begin to stylize the god as a man. And if people want to understand, well, if people want to think, well, that was the best thing, then that's how, we really can expand even further. You have to think about the symbolism of Christianity, which is man crucified, or because that's what it came into now. So earlier, when it's as Krishna, it's as this symbolism, and this is a rare picture of when it's completely metamorphosized, because generally Krishna is shown with serpents and everything around him, and that's what we'll see in these later pictures. But this is as it begins to take its metamorphosis, so this is what you have to watch, because now you'll find here Krishna laying on the boat like Dionysus, with the Naga, meaning with the actual the energies, or the Nephilim, or the chakra center energy, as we talked about that connection. As you see, this is a huge serpent, with him laying on it and using it for support. And this becomes important to actually read the symbolism. Then you see there's always a Saraswati-like entity around, as the mother is also as a mother in this type of symbolism. The mother equals, this is not only her child, but also her husband. And this comes from the knowledge that all men still come out of a woman's womb. And this is why man, masculine, male, machismo, and all of those words begin with ma, which actually means a woman, according to how our language is put together. And this, of course, is also why, just to add this information, why in the Bible God is known as being a he, or a he, because in Hebrew, he is a pentagram, but means a female, not a male. So this is how the Venusian initiation is taking place in the Old Testament with Shekinah, or the wife of the sheik, or the wife of the sheikah, or the sheikah, the wife of the sheik, and the individuals that are practicing in the cult of Al-Jabbar, who's Orion. Also, we find here Hermes, and instead of him on the Naga, Horse, and instead of him on the Naga, he's actually on the crocodile. Now, generally, these type of individuals were not so much as savior gods how we see them today, but individuals that brought key things to certain countries that basically changed how they function. So in the case with Horus, in many ways it was horses, and if you especially understand who the kingdom of Horus really was, and how they trekked the land with horses, and how they bought those horses to people, and they were completely amazed because they were domesticated, etc. And all the way up into the ancient tradition of the priestcraft in which these individuals are following, because they're coming in colonizing. That's why they have horses and all these different things that are not seen in places that they enter into. Again, we find Buddha with the swastika, and a lot of people are going to be a little upset because they really like Buddhism. But at the same time, if a person has a lot more opportunity to focus on themselves rather than the teachings and the knowledge of others for prolonged periods of time, meaning that if you look into the Buddhistic text, it basically repeats the same thing over and over again. So either you move to another level of knowledge, or you graduate, and you graduate that course, or you become stuck as what they call a Buddhist. And so, which they say you can spend thousands of lifetimes before getting an awakening. An awakening has a lot to do with your pH balance, has a lot to do with how much energy you have, your spiritual tie and connection, and whether that connection is either connected or severed, and et cetera. If something's draining your energy or giving you energy, and that's not plugged in. So there's a lot more details to it that are very specific. So it has more to do with that than what the priestcrafts have been trying to teach. Of course, we see Marduk doing the same thing, riding on a boat or a behemoth or a leviathan or a cherub, and going over to another part of the area in order to colonize. Dionysus doing the same thing. As you see, things get really redundant here. Of course, that's why we're more towards the end of today's message. We see here those melanin recessive entering into the indigenous lands and beginning to trade and show them things that they've never seen, telescopes and things of this nature. Even today, like people think, well, no, this is not what's happening. This isn't happening. Even today, you can still go into places here in Costa Rica where the people there do not really have much contact with the outside world. Likewise, if you go into the Amazon, you'll find a lot of them also. And in some of the pre-Columbian areas, especially in the Colombia, you'll find them also. So when people come with more things, you see he's got the sword out, and the people that never seen that before, then there's basically immense fascination, and then an idolization, and then if they're commanded to worship, they begin to worship. And this is why the Lord saw that man and woman were the most valuable commodities, because man and woman would bring the cows, they would bring the oxen, and they would even bring their own children if they were demanded to, just to gain favor with these lords who said that they represented the real God, because they could display things like electricity, and they could display a show of one who has Kundalini. But of course, in the background of the priesthood, you have individuals such as the Dagon character, which of course is Dagon. It has everything to do with just another packaged up version of the Sumerian Brotherhood, controlling everything, as you see the Pope with the fish hat and all this stuff people pretty much know. But you really have to see that this is a real thing, and it connects all around the world because there's another level to it. Of course, here you find a Dogon with the actual Orion giant mask on, because this really connects back to Orion, not just Venus. But you see here, this mask is actually synonymous with what the size and the stature of the entities that came by way of Venus to this planet. So that's really what the Dogon are actually involved in, for those who are still confused. And I've actually have some other pictures to show that much of the headdresses and things that they wear and the particular Adinkra language that they're using connects to the evocations of Saturn, Sirius, and this entire priestcraft that's always been going on, that according to the latest interview with the individuals that they bought from the Dogon tribe, that they don't have any problems with. In fact, they spoke very conceited and haughty, as if that humanity was just basically subservient to the gods, and that when the gods decided whether we were going to be here or not, then that's what would take place. And again, that type of idea doesn't allow you even to pass or transcend from this dimension with the graduation or university or the universal certificate, meaning that if you still feel like that something is over you and controlling you and you have to serve it, you go nowhere but the prism. Okay. So as we continue, we find here Jesus, of course, and this is obviously Dagon. Dagon is now John. John, of course, is Oannes. Oannes is the god of the sea. And that's, of course, Neptune, Dionysus, etc. And then you see the concept of using a fish to catch other fish. This is something that the priestcraft knows, that in order to catch people up into their foolish religions, they must use the own kind of people. They can't go in there as the entities that they are. And this is why you seldom see that God, quote unquote, appears to man or can be seen by man. Instead, you get these Eve angels, because it's highly possible, first of all, that their God is hyperdimensional, but in many senses cannot appear in a physical reality, but still has servants in the physical reality. And as we see here, a serpent coming from the sky, whispering into the ear of Jesus. And this is supposed to be the temptation, but in actuality is a game and a hoax of them playing the good and evil dualistic perspective with the same character. As everyone knows that Jesus, in the occult, that Jesus is actually Agatha demon, meaning that Jesus, or the character of Jesus, is the strongest demon. So keep going here. Here's the papacy and what it really looks like on a hyperdimensional level. As I said, this is an adept conversation. You'll find Cain, who's the Khan, who's the king, who's the coin, who's the Cohen, who's the priest, with his crucified man religion, which is basically not man off the cross, but man on the cross. Using the cross because it's a symbol of spokes or the wheels or the gates of the dimension, and actually tangled up in it. This means that a person doesn't have control over their chakra centers, or the chakra centers don't even work. Of course, you see the beasts back here, the dog. You see the character known as the devil, but you also see the Ta and the T, which is the cross. And you see the cherub, one here, the tetra, as it's called, hauling God, who's really Yod, or the Gothic God, who is no more than a man, being worshipped as the Most High. We find here again the priesthood of Dagon weeding its way into everywhere, carrying out the same rites that were carried on in Egypt. We see Apollo and the Gamedion, which is the original tetragrammaton, the four horses or the four horsemen that are actually pulling him as the chariot. And these are, of course, the wheels of Ezekiel. It could be as simple as an actual physical chariot rather than a spaceship that they're making it now. And of course, this is the Greek Apollo with the symbol of the priesthood on his chest, which you now see it as. Here's even a modern coin, or not so modern, but modern enough, 1792 from Barbados. You find the actual hexagram here, as we've seen in the pictures earlier, the trident, which is the fleur-de-lis, the king riding on this cherub and riding off to go and conquer something and slay something with the fork, which is also seen in the hand of the devil, of course. Here's the account of what the Mayans recorded of the arrivals of what we call today the Nephilim. This is actually supposed to be an entire scene of the Nephilim, and the animal-like natures of them is encased on their heads or in their headdresses. You see here, there's again a worship, an introduction, and then a worshiping ceremony taking place here. And then you can just tell by the whole demeanor that there is somewhat of a negative connotation going on. But of course, you don't have to take my word for that. When you get into understanding it, you'll find out that what they record is that when these entities arrived and then left, what they left was an elongated skull, crystallized. And that was kept to interact with them and to communicate with them. And that, of course, gives us the whole mythos of the crystal skull. And that's, of course, why they rolled it into the Indiana Jones, because, of course, in the Indiana Jones, they pursued the Ark of the Covenant. They pursued the Ark of the Covenant in Tibet, not in Egypt. They went to Egypt the second time, so it shows you the connection also between the Nazis. So everything is all there. This is a real story. This is something taking place. It now resides in most people's subconscious mind as just a movie or something that is fictitious, but it is, in fact, actuality. Again, we're really close to the end of this reel, so I'm just going to finish this off. As you see, it's still going on, and this is what I really wanted to tell my brothers and sisters, that humanity, we're such beautiful people. And what happens is that if we fail to realize what we're doing, of course, this is the arrow or the bow, and then this is, of course, the horn, then we can get caught up into believing that this is our tradition and this is what really defines us. And when in all actuality, it's what has been taught to us as our tradition and what defines us. So we need to be very clear about the difference between the two. the notes and the scales to the harmonics. And of course, this is a gentleman reading the Kibra Nagast to show you that the Ethiops were actually worshipers of the serpent in Ophilatreia. And even that's what the word Ethiop actually means. So anytime you look into the deeper symbolism, you'll find that the Nagas definitely passed through Nubia, and that they set up an entire priestcraft there. And that's why the Ethiopians claim that they are the founders of the original covenant. And the guy, the Weekend, obviously is in the know to a certain degree, even though he doesn't want to tell his people. But he shows the horn god Menelik, or MLK, or Moloch, the king. And of course, the peacock has always been synonymous with the Phoenicians, and also the phoenix, which of course brought the phonetics, or the language. So of course, we see here again the Sri Yantras. We also see the flute, which was held in the other hand of the individual with the 5-pointed star on their head, meaning knowing how to charm serpents. And this means that in a tense, because there's another Krishna replete with the Sri Yantra, or with the Megan star, everywhere. So you see, this is also a symbol of the priesthood. So for whoever's looking for a savior, because some people are like, and this symbol also right here is called Leviathan, by the way. It's where they get the Norwal, or the horned sea beast. But you have to look deep into symbolism before you can recognize what this is. There is, as you see, there's a reptilian portion of the brain. There's, of course, the spine in a person's body, and there's these fluids. The idea of being able to charm or move up these fluids with tones and vibrations is really what this flute symbolism entails. And that's why Pythagoras was fascinated when he was said to finally discover the